What's going on, nation? Welcome to Little Sharky Talk After Hours, where we get in here, we dominate, we discuss what's going on. Welcome to the show, people coming from Twitter. I appreciate you guys. I know moving people from Twitter to YouTube can be a certain process, and I appreciate you guys taking the time and patience to come to the new channel. This is so much more accessible and agreeable from a conversational standpoint. That is why I'm going on here. You guys know I love Twitter. I've worked on there for 5 years. I understand the convenience, but it is no longer a platform where conversation is available in any sort of live format. So we're going to be here going forward, and I appreciate you guys liking and subscribing and seeing who's in the chat. Dabby Kevin House, what up, brother? My guy, appreciate you so much, bro. So much grind, so much work to these channels. We both know it in the most personal possible way. I try to articulate it to the average person. Of course, people don't understand because it's not their grind, and I understand that. I really want to be empathic with people, and I want to tell people directly, we fully understand. We don't come into your life and act like we know what's going on with you guys, and you guys would say, well, come over to my brand, come to my new business, come do this. So we understand it's not something you necessarily connect with, and we appreciate you so much for coming to the new channel and really taking the time out of your day to come out on the new channel. And it's just a beautiful thing to open up a YouTube channel where the conversation will flow. So let's talk about it. Walker Bailey in the house. What's going on, brother? Gonna crack a beer here shortly with you guys. Trent Baskin, what's up, my guy? No doubt. Vipoop, if I'm not, Vipool, excuse me. Bonsal, what's up, my guy? Neil Kleister, what's going on, bro? I believe you're from Buffalo. Tell me where you guys are from. Tell me what's going on. As I mentioned, gonna crack a beer here. That's what I've been doing. I like to have one beer on the chat. This can last for 45 minutes to an hour. So it's a nice marinating beer. It's a nice conversational beer. It's one of my favorite beers, which I drink a couple nights a week. High Ally, a nice little beverage in Florida. Let's pour one out for the boys. Delectable beverage it is. Cheers up, fears down. And yeah, Vipool, my guy, 100%, brother. I like that VIP Bonzal. I'm into it, no doubt. Okay, for sure. I see you on that, and I appreciate you coming over to YouTube here. I'm gonna retweet this. I just, I want to just keep reiterating this. It's more so myself as well because, one of the things that I'm not fantastic at. I'm not a salesman by nature. I love to connect with people and have conversation, but salesmen just keep pounding the pavement with it, and it's and Dabby knows this. Building a channel on YouTube from Twitter is obviously a huge project. So I appreciate you guys so much for coming over and hanging out. Dab, 100%, brother. Roll that shit up. Let's talk. Let's have a fucking chat. I was going to call you, but I figured I'd go live. I can call you after if we want to talk some more business. Obviously, a lot going on here. All the channels, all the work, everything going on. But just going to take a sip here. Walker Bailey says, booking some airfare and getting my ass to Arlington for game for the ALCS. That's fucking so electric, bro. So happy for you. I know your fandom with the Rangers is beyond words. I'm sure people don't know this in the chat. You've been sitting here for now 2 seasons at least, talking about just the absolute dedication to this franchise, and I'm very happy that it's coming to fruition for you. Honestly, I just see you in it, and I'm happy for you, bro. Everybody deserves a fandom point within that in their life, and it is a beautiful thing. And I was on a podcast earlier today, which will be dropping on Thursday morning, with a couple guys that I really actually had not worked with in the past and had no real relationship with. And I want to really make this comment. I think it was something that I experienced that took me out of my, comfort window to a certain degree in terms of who I work with. I did a podcast, Circles Off podcast today with Rob Pizzola and his partner, Johnny. I'm still trying to locate his partner, Johnny, actually. I followed some guy on Twitter. I thought it was Johnny. It wasn't. And we had a great conversation. We were talking for over an hour. And it was just exploratory. It was very, very conversational in a fluid way. And I've never worked with these guys. And it was just a beautiful thing for me to get into new circles of people who think in a different way, potentially, but maybe not. And maybe the conversation bridging gaps and bringing people into similar spheres of thought and energy quotients. And I just want to give those guys a shout on this broadcast. Rob Pizzola, it was a pleasure working with you, man. It was a pleasure talking to you. And I can't wait for people to hear the conversation. And I will certainly be promoting that as much as I can because I thought it was a great experience for all of us. And Johnny, I'm trying to locate you on Twitter, brother. I actually followed the wrong guy. Some guy just hit me back and he said, "Yo, I didn't work with you today. It was not a great conversation." And I was like, "Oh shit!" But bottom line, it was a great podcast. I'm looking forward to you guys hearing that. If you guys don't follow Rob Pizzola, follow him, Rob Pizzola, on his channel, Circles Off HQ, I believe is the podcast. And it's just a beautiful thing to branch out and just take the opportunity to continue to talk to more people in the sphere and see how people really are. And I think the beautiful thing about podcasts more than anything is just the deep level of conversation that does not exist on the internet. And the internet just being this continuous and indefinite just cluster of hot takes, hot judgments, and misjudgments of people where it really is not how people are in real life. And I love to get on long form videos like that, particularly ones that are not necessarily centered around picks on a given day, where you can really start to figure out what's going on in life, how people live, how people think, how people cap the industry we're in and what's going on. So just want to give a deep shout to Rob Pizzola and, again, this guy, Johnny, who I'm still trying to locate because I actually had a great conversation with Johnny. I love him to death. Great stuff. But I'm trying to locate this guy. And we'll be retweeting that on Thursday afternoon for you guys to listen to. I think you guys are going to enjoy that conversation. I think it was very, very insightful and deep. And see what's going on in the chat. We got 8 people in here. We got 3 likes. Drop likes and retweets, guys. Appreciate that. Let's talk some sports. Let's talk some football. Let's talk some baseball. You guys give me a couple topics if you can. If not, I'll just flow off it. The other night I talked about football. I always talk about football. I mean, I created this channel on basketball, and you guys know I love basketball in the depth of my existence. But I also do love football in the depth of my existence. And obviously, I've been doing some serious work in the NFL over the last 3 weeks, 12-2 in the last 14. And if you guys watch the show, really getting into deep commentary on all the games. And I think that is one of the things that I really enjoy and I do pride myself on, is having the conversation on every single game on those Sunday shows with obviously the gun and the odds fellow when he joins us. I think he will be joining us this Sunday as well for week 6. But I will talk about football. Walker says, any personal interest in Phillies Braves tomorrow? You know what? Truthfully, in terms of playoff baseball, in terms of the gambling of it, I got to be honest with you, I don't love it. I've said this numerous times, but I really do like to enjoy the games. I know there's obviously money to be made, but at a certain point in time, as a professional handicapper, it's nice to step back and watch the game, which is obviously sort of ironic and maybe like a point of comedy, saying that in the playoffs so far, where blowouts have been just the norm and just rampant beyond belief. But I do think that it's got to tighten up at some point. I mean, I don't know if it's just the way the playoffs are structured in this new format, where I guess the whole idea was they were going to create more parity and give teams a little bit more of the backdoor element in the playoffs. I mean, they've definitely found parity because a lot of the favorites from the regular season are getting smashed. I don't think anybody has foreseen these outcomes coming at all, really. I would be shocked if somebody saw this exact bracket going to the point it is currently, but it's chaos right now in baseball. There's no way around it. It's absolute chaos in baseball. And I do think the Dodgers will probably bounce back game 3 on the road. I just think they're that good. I think they're that professional. And I think when you look at how those 2 games played, their starting pitchers had a 40.5 ERA in the first 2 games. I believe that was one of the worst, if not the worst, in the history of a playoff series. And, you guys obviously know Clayton Kershaw has been sustainably terrible in his entire career in the playoffs, so that's not entirely surprising. And obviously throwing a rookie, Bobby Miller, who doesn't have a ton of pitch variation and natural movement on his pitches, kind of juicing it up, maybe kind of transparent in his pitch selection and his sequencing. He got rocked as well. And I think that letting that be an outlier, because it is, I think the Dodgers have bounce back element in them. Obviously, in terms of the Braves, Phillies, I think it's a tough spot. I think it does take on the context of what you saw with the Astros today, where it's the classic environment where a top seed loses the game at home and has to go on the road, where people want to say it's a revenge game for the home team, and also it's home court, home field. But the fact that they have to reset home field advantage speaks to massive merit for the road team. And you saw it today with emphasis with Houston. I think it's very possible the Braves go in there and not necessarily steal game three, but just reset the advantage that is theoretically theirs based on talent. And I'm not entirely sure, but that is just a natural psychological evaluation of those games in terms of teams' high seeds going on the road game three after a home split. The motivation is gigantic, and it's not as simple as just taking the home team in that matchup. So just going to retweet this guys real quick because I know people are trying to come in here to have a conversation and probably not finding this. So yeah, and Elder's been obviously inconsistent to a certain degree. The guy has gas. He does fit that model of a little bit too consistent and lacking movement on his straight pitches. Bit of a tough sell there. Let me just retweet this guy. Yeah, 100%, 100%, without question. As you said, Nola at home, he's obviously better at home, but Nola he's always susceptible to the blow up pitch and the blow up inning, and the Braves need to have it. So we'll see there. I do think there are better plays on the board tomorrow. I'm going to pull it up here as we're getting into this conversation. I do think when you see the Dodgers laying minus 145 on the road in this situation, the Dodgers are the best spot in the entire sport tomorrow, in my opinion. Again, I don't love to gamble on it. Trent made the comment, it's beautiful to not sweat it because you can actually be a fan for once. And it is an extremely valid point. I'm just looking at it right now here. If you want to bet this for profit, you should be betting the Dodgers tomorrow, or today, I should say. I do think the Dodgers are the play. I think the Dodgers have a sick line, and I'm just evaluating this within the series. If you just completely zoom out of the matchup and you say to yourself, we have a top seed who lost both games at home and is still favored on the road down 0-2 in the opponent's hostile, supposedly tough to win in stadium, especially at minus 145, minus 150. Books are telling you a Dodgers story here. And you know how the public works. The public gets very quickly attached to recent history. People thought the Dodgers would win both of the first two games. Now the narrative shifts very quickly to the fact that the Dodgers are terrible. And that's pretty much exactly when the Dodgers will win. So I think you would be very, very smart to bet the Dodgers tomorrow. I may get on this. As I said, sometimes I like to watch the games where money's money, but sometimes watching a game for fun actually stands above it when we're gambling almost every single day of the year. So I would advise you guys onto the Dodgers. Dab says, I like the first 5 over in the Astros-Twins game. Let me look at that real quick. We got 8.5 here. Urquidy and Ryan. Ryan has been bad. I agree with that, Dab. I agree with that, bro, for sure. I think you're going to see explosiveness. I think Urquidy on the road has been just a gas can. I think Joe Ryan has been sustainably poor out of the division for a long time now here. I think you're onto something there for sure. I think, Walker, you're not making necessarily the wrong comment with the Twins backing. I think this series could go 5. I think Urquidy is very, very poor in this situation. But again, I do think that there's more of an over aspect to this game. Dab, I got to be honest with you. You and I have had numerous conversations with, with sports betting over the past year to 2 years, but sometimes the first fives for me personally become a bit of a condensed environment as opposed to an advantageous environment. And I mean that just because I want the big sample in a total. Like I want them to play 8.5, 9 innings if they can, just to get so many at bats. And I understand it's often starting pitcher dependent, and the bullpens theoretically can flip the game. Just personally, I do like the full game over more, just because I want to see the full bats and the full desperation late theoretically if it's tight with the ability to explode. I think the first five situations maybe, and again, this is complete just off the cuff conjecture. I don't have data in front of me on this. I do think the first fives may be better in the regular season where there's not utmost desperation to the game, and it does sort of play continuously to these statistical averages and norms with starting pitchers. And another point on that, these managers are very quick with the hook in the playoffs with these pitchers, where you might not even see more than 3 or 4 innings for either of these guys. So you're just kind of all over the place. And I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but personally, I like the over in the full game more. Just give me the full sample, let it fucking ride, if that makes sense. Fremont, what's up, brother? What's going on, brother? Yeah, Walker, exactly. And I understand the first five cap completely. I understand starting pitchers, you have more of an exclusive cap to the environment. I get it. But I do think that, particularly in these games, just let the desperation and the volatility take on the full sample as opposed to condensing it. But Dab's done great with the first five, so I'm not going to sit here and over critique or anything like that. But just a general comment in terms of opening up the sample as opposed to condensing the sample, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. So cheers to you guys on that. But I would say going to the 5 o'clock game tomorrow, Phillies Braves here, obviously 1-1 at the bank. Hell of a game coming. I mean, you guys know I moved out of Philly. I moved down to, I was in Allentown, but I moved back down to Florida. I'm recreating my life here. A lot of turmoil I went through, which is in the past, thankfully, and I'm so blessed to talk to you guys. But if I was still up in the Allentown area, you better believe I would have gone to this game. My wheelhouse is 5 o'clock playoff games. And it's just something I love. I love playoff baseball at twilight, at happy hour, late afternoon. I love it. I've gone to probably 4 or 5 playoff games in my life at this hour, mostly at Yankee Stadium. I love twilight baseball on weekdays. And if I was up there right now, I would be on the secondary market getting tickets to this game. This is going to be electric. The atmosphere is going to be great. The fans are just turned up the highest level. But I think just environmentally, there's something incredible about twilight baseball and happy hour baseball on a weekday. It's just people getting off work. There's a rush. There's a palpable energy. It's not too late in the night. There's still a little there's a liveliness to the group. It's just the best. It's the best. And this game is going to be awesome from that standpoint. And you look at the line, you look at the situation here. I don't know if we have pitchers or we have Nola. Who's starting for? Oh, Philly Sharp's going tomorrow. I'm sure he is. Great for him. Happy for him. Who's starting for the Braves tomorrow? You guys have that? I don't have it. I just pulled up the score app. I didn't pull up my different database here. I'm trying to juggle the live in my phone here. Okay, yeah, you guys said it before. So Elder versus Nola. I didn't look at the details, honestly, so I can't really advise on that. This is probably an over as well, if I'm being honest. The first 2 games were 3-0 and 5-4 with a back door, and the Phillies left so many runners on base. This theoretically is also an over, I think. AJ Smith, whatever his name is, Shaver. Did he improve late season? I'm not entirely sure. I stopped handicapping September 1st, but he was obviously a little inconsistent throughout the course of the year. And obviously what we were saying about, I forget what we were talking about earlier, but Elder just lacking movement on his pitches would honestly potentially be in a situation here to get rocked early. And I think there's going to be an over here, but I think the Braves bats are due to explode. The Braves had some sort of absurd statistic, I believe, where they had not scored in a long time in the playoffs. Obviously, the Rays did as well. These teams cluster and they'll cluster back. And Brew Crew 450, what's up, brother? Don't be sorry, bro. You the man. Just taking a sip of beer. Cheers to you guys on this Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. But I do think that the Braves bats are due to explode, and I think they might have gotten off their whatever was going on in their mind with that gigantic home run in the 8th inning in Game 2. I think that might springboard them forward in runs. And of course, as you guys know, Nola definitely susceptible to hard hit balls and home run balls. I think the best spot early here at 5 o'clock is probably the over. And I do think that there's supposed to be runs coming in this series as we go forward off really a cluster of non-runs for the first, 15 plus innings and whatnot. So I think that the top spot in that particular 5 o'clock game is probably the over. And I think that does speak to what the league is probably going for too, theoretically. Not to say it's remotely orchestrated before, because it's not, but I just think in general, more runs are coming here. Pitchers have uncomfortability historically. We talked about this all season on Saturday afternoon pitch times at 4 o'clock. These matinees, particularly on the East Coast on Saturdays, pitchers struggle at that hour. It's uncomfortable. They never pitch at that hour. It speaks much more to the batters. Just looking at this very loosely, I think the best spots on the board, in my opinion, are over Braves, Phillies, 8.5, and Dodgers minus 140. Those are definitely the two spots that stand out to me. Dabby Cab in the house with the over in the Astros game, 4.5, which I also think is a sharp look. I think that the game is also an over, only because I was a little bit worried about condensing the sample as opposed to letting the sample play out through 9. But I think the idea is correct, and I'm pretty sure Dab will probably hit that. I think Urquidy's probably giving up runs early. I do think that the Twins will probably tee off in that environment off obviously not getting anything today, but I think slightly outlierish. Obviously, Christian Javier to a certain degree got away with murder. Bases juiced in the 5th, 1 out, back-to-back strikeouts. Couple very questionable calls on those strikeouts as well. I think the Twins bats will get to Javier tomorrow, Urquidy tomorrow. I think you're looking at I think Dabby's right. That's where I'm going back on this, but I think also it's going to be maybe more so Twins-centric, but also I think Joe Ryan is unreliable in this spot. So I think now that I'm going through it, Dab, if you're still in the chat, I think you're spot onto it. I think this is probably an over first 5 and game. I think both lineups will tee off on these pitchers. I think the playoffs in general are due for some back and forth games too. Like so many of these games have been just blowouts on one side, and it's really we're due for good playoff baseball, back and forth, high scoring. Lineups competing against each other, pitchers maybe not being so elite sustainably as they potentially fatigue or whatever's going on in the whole thing. So I think you're onto it, and I think you're right. So I think those are, of course, not official plays from the standpoint that I'm sitting here actually physically placing them myself, but those are definitely the spots. And my guy Brew Crew, this is High Lie IPA, bro. Great beer from Florida. Excellent beverage. Cheers to you, bro. And over Astros is a good look first 5, without question. Neil says, do you think baseball should change the playoff format? No, I don't. I think this year was just a bit of an outlier. I think that it was just teams underperforming or overperforming in small windows. But I think that's the beauty of the format, where ultimately you gotta perform, and you have to have starting pitching that performs for you. And I think that's always been the game in MLB baseball anyway. I think it's very easy to say that the best out of 3 series with all 3 games in one stadium may be outlierish or misrepresenting competitive quality in the sport. But if you really go back over the years prior, it was always division series, which always felt condensed anyway. I think most fans, at least myself, always felt like when a team got to the division series, you were already in a sparks flying volatility environment where you were not comfortable, you could lose really quickly. Just look at the Dodgers this series. They're in a hole and they only lost 2 ball games. And I remember going back 90s, 2000s, a lot of teams that could have probably won the World Series would lose in the division series because the division series was the most volatile. If they got through the division series, they were going to win the CS and they were probably going to win the title. But it was just the DS that would hold them hostage because it was so small window. But the crucial point is, if you are the best team, you make it to the best of 5, not the best of 3. So, Neil, your question was, should we restructure and get rid of the 3? I think the 3 is great because it brings more teams into the competitive atmosphere of the regular season again in the playoffs. I think the volatility of I think if I was going to adjust the playoffs, what I would do actually is I would make the DS 7. And I think actually if we're going to make this so polarized and segregated to whatever's going to go on here, if we're going to allow the wild card series in the first round to all be best of 3 in one stadium, we should make the DS and the CS both 7. If those teams are willing, if they're willing to prove their quality through the regular season and also beat an equally graded team in the first round, you know what? Give us 7 in the DS and the CS and the series, because truthfully, that brings out the best competitive quality in the top 4 teams in each conference. Why do we have to have 5, then 7? What are we saving? Like 2 days on the calendar? Like, what's the argument? You know, like, let us see what's really real when we get to the top 4 teams in each league. And I think that would be a great alteration, actually, in the structure. I think the DS should be 7. And Alfredo, I appreciate you, man. Account 1, 2, 3, brother, my guy, no doubt. And I think that I'm just going through it off the top of my head. Now that I'm thinking about it, let the wild card be the wild card, just a best of 3 quick hitter. Those teams weren't good enough in the regular season, so let them fight it out in a small window environment. But if you get through that round, you've proven yourself enough. Let's get 7. Let's let the pitchers do what they do. Let's let the bats have a big enough sample to even themselves out where, if bats go cold for 2 games, you shouldn't lose your entire season theoretically. That's the problem with the best of 5 for these teams like Dodgers, Braves, go back years with big lineups from the Yankees, the Red Sox, whatever. All of a sudden the bats go cold for 2 games. They got 2 ace pitchers. You're done. Your whole season's done. That's it. And I think it hyper sensationalizes ace pitchers, which is not necessarily wrong, but at the same time, the whole point of team sports is that you have to grind through your team, and you shouldn't be able to have one player determine the entire outcome. And if you throw your ace pitcher game 1, game 2, you lose game 3, you bring him back on short rest in game 4, series is over. Give me 7. And again, crucial point, it's only 2 more days calendar wise. So from a standpoint of being elongated and just too far into the winter, that's not even really a valid point from MLB if they're making that argument. So I don't think there's any reason that the DS should not be 7 games. But we're talking about it. We don't know if Manfred's talking about it, honestly, but I do think that would be a great maneuver and just an adjustment for competitive neutrality. And I think it would make the game better. I really do. I think that fans across the board in all markets, big and small, would agree we want bigger sample for sure. 100% Walker, no doubt. As you said, and what are we gaining from the extra 8 games? Nothing. And the crazy thing is too, like, they cut the divisional games this year or last year or whatever it was from 19 to 12. Cut the out of division games. Like, it's funny because they want the out of division games and the interleague games for marketability and brand growth and this whole thing. But I think they're going to quickly find that people they don't care that much. What MLB is really tone deaf to is this idea that you can't push rivalries on people. Rivalries take decades to build upon themselves. And I think this is why when you see these out of division and out of interleague games, MLB thinks it's marketable from the standpoint that they're bringing in small markets to play the big markets and it's going to grow the brand. And I certainly get that. But I think that really what actually brings people into the sport more than anything is competitive base and rivalries and people caring, there's no way in my mind that the New York Yankees are ever going to be rivals of the Colorado Rockies, just as many times as MLB puts them against each other for the next 20 years. And it speaks to just this tone deafness in MLB marketing. I think that obviously maybe 19 is too much, but you know what? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. And maybe we should restructure this with less interleague games and less divisional games, but more in league games. Like why are the Yankees and the Red Sox not playing the Central more and the West more? Let's let those teams play. Like if you look at, particularly in terms of the way the playoffs are discerned, right? The playoffs are discerned record in league. So let's not go overboard with interleague games, which are largely irrelevant. Let's pit all the teams in the same league against each other more. I think that's a good idea. And let them play it out and get more matchups between the Yankees and the Mariners, Yankees and the Astros, Rangers and the Rays. Like those are the matchups in the same league. And then your playoff race is more accurate as to what's going on. So I think that's an interesting point. Yeah, and I think shortening the calendar is reasonable, but I think that scheduling is also crucial in terms of who plays who, and are there wasted games? Are there useless games? Are there games that just make no difference? Rocco, what up, brother? What's going on, bro? Cheers to you, man. You the dog. Appreciate you, man. But yeah, I think that would be the first thing I would say if I ever had a point in the conversation. Let's put more in-league games, not in the division. Cut the bullshit interleague games where the games are just irrelevant. It's pointless. And it's always the interest and the intrigue of MLB baseball from the standpoint that there's so much to improve upon. The league is not manicured perfectly right now. That's for sure. But there's a lot to improve upon. So I'm welcome to comments. 17 guys in the chat. I see you guys. What's up? Big dogs in the house. Drop comments, drop questions. I'm just sitting here flowing through, having a beer here, late night here, Wednesday morning, and just hanging out with you guys. So I appreciate the questions. We'll talk football. We'll talk baseball. We'll talk basketball, anything. Just having a beer, shooting the shit. Any expectations for Wembanyama? One thing about Wembanyama, I think, even go back to last night, you saw the way he played in the preseason opener. The guy is just an incredibly, incredibly well-crafted mind. And he's obviously one of the best bigs to ever play the game, theoretically, from a youth perspective, if not the best. But I think his mind is well cultivated. And I think that's going to serve him incredibly well. Even just a small moment within the game, you guys saw Chet Holmgren kind of flopped off of him, and he kind of laughed it off. I mean, he kind of laughed it off like he'd been in the league for 7 years. I think he's going to have a great season, and I saw the Rookie of the Year odds, and I think he's going to win the Rookie of the Year. I don't think Scoot Henderson's going to win. I think the press, who obviously has a lot of control over this, is so unbelievably biased to Wembanyama anyway. Well, I think if you just want to make a 1-unit bet on him at -110, I believe it is, for Rookie of the Year, I think you're cashing a ticket there. I might actually play it myself after we finish up here. And can you take a sip of water, guys? I think the Sixers picking up Oubre is fine. I don't think it changes the team that drastically. If you remember when he played for the Dubs, he was a very above-average role player. He's athletic. He shoots the three. He's a good defender. I don't think he does anything more than that, but I think they've had players like that throughout the entire arc of this group. And I think the turmoil with James Harden continues. And I think the longer that James Harden just puts on this charade of being just completely just bored and unable to continuously perform with a franchise, he becomes just not a useful player for any team because he brings so much chaos to the franchise. And, you see what he's doing, and people were saying he's going to be out of shape. He's going to do this and that. He's not out of shape. He looks fit. I mean, if we're being honest, if you guys see tape of him in the last couple of weeks, he looks very fit. So it's not about his commitment to the sport. It's about his emotional commitment to himself and a franchise. And I think to a certain degree, he's an emotional guy where I think he was very committed to Houston. And when Houston shipped him out, he realized that, this league is cutthroat and he's at the mercy of the business of it. So he's going to play back. And, one of the things that is so underspoken in the media game is that the players do get to a certain degree moved around against their will. And people always say, well, I get moved around against my will for $50 million a year. Trust me, we all would. That's not the point. That's a side point, and we'll let that always be a baseline point in the conversation. The point is allowing that to be what it is. Players still have humanistic motivations, and when they're moved around constantly, it's hard for them to figure it out. And James Harden has been moved around because of himself, theoretically, but I think it's more than that. I think it's the way this guy is made emotionally. I think he's a very emotional guy. He didn't like necessarily failing in Houston. You guys remember he was noted as being the big game choker for 7 years running. Couldn't hit a shot in the big Western Conference playoff games. But I think it grayed on his mind. I think, to be honest with you, I just he's a tough read, but I don't think he wants to continuously move around. I think he wants to find comfortability. And I think it's hard to find comfortability in professional basketball because I think the teams are just very, very hard to integrate with, particularly when you're getting older in your career and you have a huge contract point. So it's just he's a wild conversation because as you can see, I'm kind of like my mind is like kind of like whatever the fuck with this guy because he's hard to figure out, honestly. Like, is it him? Is it the team? Is he chaotic? Is the team chaotic? Who's tyrannical? Who's not? Like, it's hard to figure out, honestly. I don't know. But, I love Philly from the standpoint. I love Joel. I've always loved this game. Always loved this game. I love Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey is one of my favorite players in the entire league. I think the kid has incredible bounce. I think he has great just mental game. I think he's a great person off the court. Just love his game coming up through high school in Kentucky. Love his game, period. But I think the Sixers are really in a tough spot coming in the East right now. Obviously, two times stacked here with the Celtics and Milwaukee. I think it's going to be a tough buy this year for the Sixers, regardless. I think the Sixers will make us some money, but you guys know how the Sixers are. They're going to make you money in the regular season, and they're going to win home games where it's big primetime games against conference opponents or Western Conference opponents that come into Philly. Philly brings a huge crowd, and the Western Conference opponent does not perform. That's where you're going to make money off them. And, situationally over the last couple of years, they have performed well on the road at the West in certain environments, mostly against bad teams, if I recall correctly. I remember them covering at San Antonio a couple of times. I think they covered at Minnesota a couple of times, stuff like that, short lines, just Publix type of stuff. But this team is going to be a 3 or 4 seed, and they're not going to win. I mean, then that's kind of the state of NBA basketball, and it's been the state of NBA basketball for the last 50 years. This is part of the reason why certain people who don't like NBA basketball don't like it is because they always say, well, we know who's going to win the title. It lacks parity, theoretically. And you're looking at a season that does theoretically lack parity, especially in the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference is going to be very dominant from a Milwaukee and Boston standpoint. There's no way around it. I think Miami has capped themselves. Jimmy Butler doing his thing. I think that's a point to a weaker Eastern Conference the last couple seasons. I think this is definitely going to be an Eastern Conference Finals. Milwaukee and Boston will be a great series, and there's no way around it. I think the West will have massive parity yet again. I think the West will be highly entertaining. And I think the West will be very bettable from the standpoint of just so many teams competing at a neutral value where you can find zigzag within the continuous scheduling of the teams and the rivalries and the back and forth, home to away and such and such. But I do think that the West will have more parity for sure. I think it's hard to pick a Western winner right now. I think that it's a very open season. I think we need to see what happens. And I think that obviously that's kind of a fish comment. I always say, well, the whole point of prognostication is knowing what happens before it happens. But I think especially in futures markets over the next, 7 months, there's going to be a ton of ebbs and flows, and it's going to be really, really a great opportunity to obviously dominate, but really see what happens with these teams and make adjustments in our handicapping and watch them learn from each other and grow. Because I think there's going to be just a lot of different things where we're going to see what's going to happen. I think it's wide open, really, really. Yeah, Walker, I totally agree with you. I think that, as you said, Marcus Smart is a great addition. Derrick Rose, so low key, great addition. He had a couple great quotes out of training camp already about coaching and being a mentor for the young players, particularly John Morant. I think it's a great signing, and I think Marcus Smart is obviously, a battle-tested veteran player coming over there. Speaking of the Memphis Grizzlies, obviously Dillon Brooks now with the Rockets. I gotta say, guys, you guys have known this for the last couple of years. I don't dislike Dillon Brooks. People dislike him, but I always say this to people: why do you dislike Dillon Brooks? Do you know him? Do you know him personally? Like he did something to you? Like you really dislike him? No. You know why you dislike him? Because the mainstream media tells you to dislike him. And that's pretty much what most people in their life think in terms of their takes on pro athletes. A very select group of people that are the mainstream media have the ability to tell people what to think about athletes. Dillon Brooks is a peak competitor. He's a guy like Draymond Green. He's got peak competitive alpha dog things in him. When he gets on the court, he competes to survivalistic levels. People should like that more than they hate it because it's almost non-existent in contemporary basketball. But again, people watch SportsCenter and they watch commentary and they're taught to hate that. And where I'm going with this is I think Dillon Brooks is going to be a great influence on the Rockets. I think the Rockets have a young core. I think they have totally, utterly adjusted their mentality. Ime Udoka, Dillon Brooks, Fred VanVleet. You get literally disrespected prime career, small forward, point guard coming into a group with an ex-finals coach who's noted as being hard on young players and a discipline-minded coach. I think the Rockets have huge upside this year. Huge. And I think crucial point, I think they have a deep psychological edge they didn't have last year. You guys remember last year, Jay and I used to talk about this on the air all the time. Jay Silas, who was the son of an NBA head coach himself, just did not have the mentality to motivate a group and really have a handle on the group and really put them in the right direction in terms of a disciplinarian way. Ime Udoka is the polar opposite, and they didn't really have any veterans with a voice. Now they have two veterans with a voice that are playoff tested. This is a massive psychological upgrade from this group, and the front office did great things. And I saw a clip of Dillon Brooks doing his dance, his little like whatever it is on the court. The young players loved it. And this is what I love for Dillon Brooks. He has the ability to be a leader with a younger group. He's mature. He's been there, but he's also a young, lively, childish type of guy from the standpoint he likes to have fun. So it's the polar opposite of what you hear from like a Matthew Stafford not connecting with the young receivers in training camp. Obviously, the age gap is a little bit bigger there, but Dillon Brooks, 27, 28, 29, whatever he is, and you get these young guys, Jalen Green, a couple other guys, 21. D Brooks he's such a good dude for the young guys. He's going to lead them. He's going to bring a great mentality, but he's also going to connect with them and have fun with them. I think it's just amazing psychology with this group. Amazing psychology. And DZ the Fade, what up, brother? Appreciate you, man. Benny Rash in the house. What's up, bro? Shark After Dark, you know it. Big dogs in the house. Walker says Dillon Brooks has fulfilled this exact role for a young rebuilding team, the Memphis Grizzlies. Right, 100%. Also, great point. Great point. And I think he's gotten out of this potential chaos with the Grizzlies. And I think he gets blamed for a lot, which he didn't necessarily do. I think he was just grinding his game, and he got caught up in the Ja Morant sweepstakes from the standpoint of Ja's you know, randomly irresponsible gun issues and the coach maybe not disciplining and like this whole thing and also this weird cross section where we talked about this last year and the year before, but generations in NBA are very, very sensationalized where you would never think that a 21-year-old and a 27-year-old are in a different generation, really. But in the NBA, they are in a totally different generation. And I think that with Dylan Brooks, as Walker mentioned, truthfully, he was just enough older than those guys, Jaren Jackson and Ja, to be very specific. There was a disconnect there. There was a significant disconnect there culturally in what they had seen in their life. And I think it really did create a bit of a snag in the group psychology. And, when you go over to Houston, I think, as I just mentioned, but I'll say it again, you're going to get a better coach that's going to put these guys into a better position to succeed for themselves psychologically. But I think D. Brooks is the type of guy. Certain people get better as they get older in life. I'll say this, I'm one of them. I function better as an adult than I did as a kid. Certain people just get better when they get older. They've always been a bit of an old soul anyway. They didn't like the bullshit of youth, the runaround, the nonsense. Get a little older, things even out. Things become very peaceful still. And I think Dylan Brooks is going to get to that point with the Rockets where he strikes me as a guy who's better when he's older. And he was always kind of maybe caught in between in his youth. You saw the way he played in Oregon. Guy was an absolute dog. He's been a dog his entire life. Those type of dudes have this deep old soul mentality in them. But when they get caught in the crosshairs of youth and juvenile bullshit, which is oftentimes what, unfortunately, Ja Morant was bringing to that roster, they act improperly. So I think you're going to see a free guy. I think you're going to see a mature guy who's always been there, but was just in a bad environment for himself, therefore bad results outwardly and misjudgment by the public. But I think you're going to see him execute at a much higher level with the Rockets, without question. 100%. 100%. Love Orlando. We loved Orlando last year. The only thing that I would say about Orlando is I hope that we're not going to get adjusted lines. If you remember last year, they were a dog almost all the time, which is where they really covered well. And I do fear to a certain degree. I will hedge that. I don't fear anything. I really pride myself on not being fearful, but I do really think that what we saw the previous year with Detroit being great and then all of a sudden being mildly adjusted with a couple roster turnover points, this happens a lot where the young darling who covers a bunch as a dog the next season is a little bit more adjusted to neutral pick'ems and favorite spots where the games they covered as a small dog by a couple points, now they're pushing those lines as a favorite and they're not covering on the same margins that they were covering when they were getting 4 to 5 points. So Walker, I agree with you. I love the group, but I do worry that the lines might get shifted. And this is pretty much the storyline of every NBA season, ATS, in the first 4 months. There's always a new darling. And I think that it could be the Rockets this year, honestly. I think we might be buying the Rockets a lot. And there's a couple other teams, but just keep that in mind. It's rarely ever the darling from last year that continues because the books adjust those numbers and you're not on the same line points with them. And Taylor Jenkins, just a little bit too idealistic. Obviously, UPenn, a little too woke for most of us, I would think. But, that is what it is. These guys they get so warped into the forgiveness. And they forget that, forgiveness is amazing, but accountability is what got them to where they were. And forgiveness is amazing. You got to forgive everybody. Really, you do. But you have to be accountable first. And if you're super accountable and you make a mistake, we'll forgive your accountability, not preemptively forgive your lack of accountability, which is where the woke bullshit really becomes a flawed point because you're forgiving a lack of accountability. You work your ass off and you make a mistake, you're a human being. You grinded your ass off. We're proud of you. Fine. This is the world we're living in. We're rewarding preemptive forgiveness for complacency. And that's the wokeism. That's what Taylor Jenkins does to a certain degree. And I like the guy, but I think a little bit too woke. A couple other coaches preaching this woke politics. You can't forgive a lack of action and a lack of personal discipline. That's what gets people into trouble in this life. And it's professional basketball, it's professional sports, but it's also personal psychology in this world. So just a point of reference there, guys. And yeah, Dean's by law. What up, brother? Walker, I agree with you. I would say that I do want to look at them closely from the standpoint that they were also very good ATS last year and just see where they're adjusted. Because obviously, if they get adjusted in the same format that we think that Orlando could, they might obviously become sharpened up. Let me pull up the NBA real quick. I want to look at a couple teams that I think could be very undervalued here. Yeah, and sometimes exactly. And I think we got to look a little bit more from point A being right now into the future and thinking to ourselves, who are the teams that could be this year's point? All right, I'm pulling it up here. I got the East. Knicks, Heat, no. Knicks could improve ATS, in my opinion. I think the Knicks could improve ATS, particularly on the road. Atlanta is something that is always a work in progress. John Collins not on the roster. A couple moves. Obviously, Trae Young, year 2. With DeJounte over there, theoretically, they might improve. They should improve by conventional wisdom. Wizards are neutral. Orlando is, again, tough. Toronto should improve. I like Toronto theoretically. Toronto last year was very inconsistent. You got a regime turnover. I think Toronto's a bye team. Out of those top 6 teams that I'm looking at here in the East, and that's not top 6 from last year, it's just where I'm looking at the database. I think the Knicks have a bye element to them, and I think the Raptors have a bye element. I think Milwaukee's right on their average pretty much always. You're going to buy Milwaukee in spots where they're too cold. You want to buy them off a trip, off a losing streak, a motivational spot. Boston's the same thing. I think Cleveland has been incredibly unpredictable. If you guys remember last year, Cleveland was just like they were death for me at least. I think I lost 10 to 15 units on Cleveland exclusively. There was the Donovan Mitchell tree with Darius Garland. They were inconsistent. They didn't play consistent ball situationally quarter to quarter. They were really hard to predict. The Bulls were the same way. Bulls were really hard to predict. Hornets are in shambles. Sixers, I think, are going to be neutral. I think Brooklyn could be a bye team, actually. Now that I'm looking at this, I think Brooklyn could be a bye team. A lot of good comments coming out of the Brooklyn tree. I love Mikal Bridges. I think Ben Simmons has made a lot of positive comments in terms of what he's been doing in the offseason mentally and physically. So on this general conversation, I also love Detroit again. I think Detroit's going to have a bounce-back campaign. And I think the Pacers might be kind of maybe bye, but a little bit on their mean. Just very loosely looking at the Eastern Conference, I think the top 3 bye teams are probably Brooklyn, Toronto, and Atlanta. And Knicks and Pacers are probably 4 and 5. Western Conference, going to be a tough read, a lot of parity. I like buying the Dubs this year early. They were terrible last year. I think they're going to find a reboot without Jordan Poole on the roster psychologically. I think there's going to be a massive uptick in their quality there. I think the Wolves are going to be something we figure out as we go over the first couple of weeks. I think the Grizzlies are going to be a bye team in a lot of environments. I think Marcus Smart's going to be a huge point. You guys also remember the last couple of years without John Morant, they performed great. Obviously, no Dylan Brooks, some roster turnover, so we'll see what happens. But I think that's definitely an element there. Nuggets are going to be the Nuggets. Thunder were a little overvalued last year ATS. Portland's going to be a tough read. They could be maybe covering early season. I think some of these really bad teams will cover early season on huge numbers, plus 12.5, losing by 8 points consistently, whatever. Houston, I think it's going to be a bye. I think Clippers are tough to read. Clippers are always tough to read. You guys know this from the last 3 or 4 years. Clippers are just one of those teams for me that I struggle with, and I probably will find some spots, but not consistently have a read game to game. Utah is going to be a difficult read, new team. Lakers are going to be good. I like the Lakers a lot. I think they're going to cover a lot of spreads. I think this is going to be one of LeBron's last years where he's really competitive. I think Anthony Davis is making a lot of really, really powerful remarks in the media about, maybe taking over the team to a certain degree and really, exuding his power as a person in terms of leadership. So I like the Lakers a lot. I don't like the Suns. I think the Suns are going to have a really tough time covering spreads. I think they're going to be laying big numbers. I think they're going to have a lot of adjustments to do with this new roster. Bradley Beal coming over here. I think there's just Oftentimes, not enough ball to go around. Too many shooters, not enough bigs. I think it's a little bit of a weird roster. Spurs are going to be an adjustment. We don't know how Wembanyama is going to play. Obviously, theoretically, that's going to be a move. Sac Kings were real hot last year. We got to adjust off that. I do like the Pelicans. I think the Pelicans will be a buy. I think they'll be improved. I think Zion coming back, a couple points. Love the coach, Willie Green, always did. I think they went through bullshit last year. I think the Mavericks are, my guy says Mavericks are a good play. I think the Mavericks are really a tough spot to evaluate because I think we have not seen enough sample size with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, and I think they've been very inconsistent. And I think Jason Kidd, honestly, is not a very good NBA coach, and that's just my candid opinion. I think he's a great human being. I would say it's no shade. I just don't think he's a great motivator. I think he lacks energy. I think he lacks adjustability in the game. I think he's let Luka get away with too much. I think when you have two free-thinking freelance players on offense like Luka and Kyrie, you need a much more disciplined coach. I think he's the wrong coach for the group by a mile. I think Dallas is going to hover in the 8th seed for most of the year and just not do what they're supposed to do. So that's just my candid take and my quick take. But there you have it, guys. We'll see what's going to happen. Taking a sip, open up the chat here. Going to finish this beer with you guys. And yeah. Yeah, and I just think that Jason Kidd is just not the right guy. I think they need to bring in a totally different coach. Shohei Ohtani is a great question. I don't really have a target destination in my mind from the standpoint of, some beautiful vision or something. I think just any team that can put him in the right spot to succeed, a successful franchise, just off the top of my head, I'd love to see him sign with Seattle, honestly. Just my first thought, just Seattle. I like Seattle. They're a great team. They're up and coming. They have a great pitching staff. He'd fit in great. When he comes back from his surgery, he's a great hitter. And I think obviously Pacific Northwest fits the closer to home model. I know he wants to be on the West Coast. I don't. Obviously, Seattle's not historically a big spender, but I would love Seattle. Really, I really would. And Walker, I agree with you. Dodgers are just so cliche at this point. It's like the Dodgers are just doing, they're going to sign everybody and, whatever. I wouldn't mind seeing the Rangers. I wouldn't mind seeing the Cubs, 100%. I'd love to see the Cubs, actually. Now that you say that, I'd love to see him with the Cubs. He would bring so much life to Chicago. He'd bring so much life to Wrigleyville and that fan base and just the energy behind that fan base. That would be a great destination. It's more so, is he willing to go there? Is he comfortable? It's not to say he wouldn't be comfortable in Chicago. He's a very comfortable human being, but he's obviously from the Asian continent coming over to the West Coast, where it's now coming to Central U.S. You're not on the water, which I do think is a certain point that people probably don't talk about, but I think he probably likes being on the water. And it's maybe a subconscious thing, it's a psychological thing, but I do think that he probably doesn't want to be landlocked like that. Just my original thought on that. I could see the Yu Darvish thing. I could see that for sure. I don't think San Francisco. I just think that just in general, I think San Francisco is probably not going to spend like that. And I think that they have not made a splash like that probably ever, at least in the last 25 years. The last time they had, I can't even recall. It just doesn't strike me as the market for that. I do think Trevor Bauer does get signed. I think he probably gets signed by a smaller club. I think that's just unfortunate because obviously he's a big-time player. He kind of reminds me of Deshaun Watson a little bit. Shunned off the court, off the field, whatever you want to call it. Now that I'm thinking about it, Trevor Bauer reminds me of Deshaun Watson a lot. Obviously, I think Deshaun Watson probably made more transgressions than Trevor Bauer. But again, largely to a certain degree ambiguous. We don't entirely know what happened. And obviously Trevor Bauer at this point has proven that basically nothing happened. And he was completely misrepresented and basically criminally tyrannized by media outlets and, a public narrative. So I think he's owed a gigantic apology by everybody. I think he's owed a gigantic apology by MLB, but that doesn't mean that ownerships are going to sign this guy to the contract he wants or the market he wants. And I think that it's hard to see where he's going to fit in terms of a playoff atmosphere in a big market right now. And that's not to say he doesn't deserve it, because I think he does deserve it. But I think that the way MLB owners sign players, it's It's unfortunate, but it's a PR nightmare. And it's tough. It's tough. Benjamin, 100%, brother. Blatant lies. But you know how this world works. It's brutal. He's now all of a sudden a media spectacle. He didn't even do it, but he's a media spectacle. So owners think about that, and good owners can deal with it. But unfortunately, a lot of these owners are not good owners. They're businessmen. They're not psychological managers of players. They don't really understand team sports and the detail of it. So it's tough to figure out. Walker, 100%. Exactly what I just said. 100%. 100%. They need a good owner that will stand up for him. 100%. 100%. 100%. Oh yeah, Ben, 100%. No doubt. No doubt. I think about, the franchises that would sign him. I mean, I don't even know off the top of my head who's a good owner in baseball from the standpoint of, public relations, political centeredness. I don't even know. I will not claim to be very, very fluid with MLB owners and their moral compass, if you will. So I don't even know. I do think that he deserves a lot better than a small market team. Like I could see that one of the first teams that came to my mind when you guys made that comment was the Pirates, because I could see that. Like the Pirates will sign an older pitcher. You guys remember they signed Jose Quintana last year, and then they moved him. That kind of fits. I hate to say it, but it kind of fits the Jose Quintana Pittsburgh signing, like stuff like that. And the guy doesn't deserve it, but it's just what happens, unfortunately. Exactly, and that's why I thought Pittsburgh. Because it's small market, they don't really have a lot of media exposure. They've signed guys like this before in their early 30s who are quality pitchers and going through whatever and the whole thing. I could see Cleveland too. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, like in that area, small markets, not a lot of media in that area. They're not going to come in that aggressively. They'll probably come in spring training more so in Florida or Arizona than they would actually in the local markets. That's how the media works. They're very geographically oriented and whatnot. So, yeah, I could see Kansas City. I do think, just in my opinion, I think that Bauer would not want to go to Kansas City. I think he'd prefer to go up there in that Great Lakes corridor, if you will, the Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland, the whole thing. I do think that corridor does offer at least some more agreeability geographically for a player like Bauer, I think he's a smart guy. You heard his dissertation about the research that he had obviously exonerated himself from the accusation. He's very articulate. He's smart, so he's very consciously aware of where he's going to play and how it's going to affect him. Just my opinion of the guy. I think he would function better in Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, or Cleveland than he would in Kansas City, and I think he would probably select that for sure. I can see the Red Sox too, but I do think one thing. This is why I made the comment about Deshaun Watson. If you guys remember last year, Deshaun Watson came back in his first year, and he wasn't very good. And it took him a year to really get adjusted back to professional sports. And obviously, it's not the same environment, but I do think something about owners, particularly smarter owners, they might want to see him pitch for a non-contender for a year before they sign him. I feel like he kind of has to come back and just reintegrate himself into major leagues with like a bad team. And so based on that, I would be surprised if he didn't sign with a bad team for 1 year. And then once they see he's back and he's gotten his flow, and he might get rocked in April and he might find his flow in mid-May, June, whatever. But I think it might take him a little time. He's been off the grid, so much emotional turmoil. Obviously, not pitching against major league hitters in real games and the whole thing. So I think I could definitely see him signing with a smaller market team for 1 year, and then a bigger market team saying, "All right, he's back. Let's go," and the whole thing. North Texas, yeah, right. Anyway, guys, that's 1 hour. I usually get 1 hour in me, and I'm pretty burned. So appreciate the conversation with you guys so much. Appreciate you guys firing up the chat. Love the questions. Love the conversation. We'll be on here tomorrow with some more comments. Going to look at college football. A couple NFL plays have dropped already. Cincinnati Bengals -2.5. Rams -6.5. Get on those now. Good key numbers for those. Appreciate you guys so much. Walker, Benjamin, My guy, appreciate you so much, bro. All the other dudes in the chat, you guys are legends. Let's keep the conversation flowing. I'll be on here 2-3 nights a week, if not more. NBA will be starting in 2 weeks. Junior Brown and the Shark, big time content coming to Sharky Waters Nation and Bet US TV 3 days a week. Cannot wait to do it. Cannot wait to bring you guys the top quality analytics, hype, and chat on a daily basis. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for being great people, feeling the energy, bringing the energy to the chat, and let's fucking dominate. Sharky Waters Nation, not where it's a lifestyle. Ride the wave we gotta walk. Let's go.